Hello, welcome to the OSU Sports Extra podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by Dean Rule on a rainy Wednesday. Dean, is it raining in Stillwater?
It's a little cloudy here.
That's it, just cloudy?
It poured heavy last night, but
Gotcha.
we've since gotten past that. It's
Right
a new
on.
day, Patrick.
New day.
New
New
horizons.
rainy day. All right. Well, we got a couple things we can get into. I guess we can start with basketball. What they've gone from a 5-game winning streak. Now they've lost 3 straight. Is there, things kind of went off the rails at West Virginia a little bit. Has there been a common theme to these 3 losses?
The common theme is defense. It's evaporated, Patrick, and this has been the mainstay all year for them.
How is that possible? That was one of their hallmarks.
Yeah, so I mean, in the past 3 games, they've allowed 90.6 points per game, Patrick. It's hard to win games. And their offense has looked good at points during that. But to compete with that numbers is tough. And I'd look at 2 different things on this. I think for sure Avery Anderson being out, they're still trying to learn how to play with him, or play without him rather. And, it's growing pains because I think offensively, when it was announced that Avery Anderson wasn't going to be playing, I think offensively, when Mike Boynton says, hey, his duties are going to be distributed, between the guards, maybe 2 or 3 guys need to step up and score a couple extra points a game. I think that's doable. But when we look at Avery Anderson, the defender, I don't think there's anybody else on that team who can do what he does defensively. And when you're playing, a team like Kansas who's getting hot, who looks like every bit possible, every bit likely that they could repeat as national champions, then when you're playing a TCU team that gets Mike Miles and Eddie Lampkin back, you're gonna, when the defense is not there, when you don't have that great on-ball defender like Avery Anderson is, you're gonna see struggles. And then I think a couple other things factor into the West Virginia loss, but still that's the common theme is not having Avery Anderson. So I think that's the biggest factor in what's going on. And then also, at least in the past 2 games, Patrick, Caleb Boone has sat on the bench most of the games. He's getting into early foul trouble. And so while that probably affects them more on an offensive side than a defensive side, nonetheless, it's going to affect the team overall. And then I think the third thing that you can point to are turnovers, Patrick. In the past 3 games, against Kansas, they had 15. Against TCU, they had 17. And against West Virginia, they had 18. And that 18 ties the season high that they set against Texas way back in January. So I think those are the 3 things I would point to when we talk about why all of a sudden they're on this skid. Because when you're allowing 90.6 points per game, Patrick, something's wrong with the defense. And I think when you can point to no Avery Anderson and still trying to learn to play without him. And then I think Caleb Boone missing a ton of minutes in the past 2 games.
So what do you do?
I don't know, Patrick. It's a good question because
you'd be a coach if you knew the answer, right?
Exactly. I'd be over in Gallagher-Iba Arena right now in an office, not chatting with you. But, I think there's 3 games left on the schedule. And so I think maybe if we look at this philosophically, is it something that can be changed or is this just who you are? Because we're at the dying stretch of the regular season leading into the Big 12 tournament. And I think that maybe you can say that's the case with the turnovers because the turnovers have been an issue all year. And they talk about wanting to have it fixed and working on it and doing all these things, but it might just be part of the team identity. They turn the ball over, they live or die by that type of thing. And I think something like Caleb Boone, that's not gonna, the stretch he's on right now is not going to last. He's going to get it figured out and get back into the rhythm he was in, I believe. Because, against Kansas, he set a career high, Patrick. He scored 27 points. And then in the past 2 games, he's scored 7 points in 16 minutes across 2 games. Partially being he fouled out against West Virginia. And then he got into early foul trouble against TCU, and so he saw a drop in his minutes. And so I think that's something that's going to be resolved. Yeah, but I think the biggest question is, can you come close to replicating what Avery Anderson was able to do on defense? And I'm sure the Cowboys will be able to do something. I'm sure they'll figure it out. And I think getting back-to-back home games this week helps, maybe just from a confidence standpoint. But they are going to be those two games are going to be against tough teams, and so we'll see how it all shakes out in this final stretch. But what we do know, Patrick, is in roughly, well, I guess in a week, 1 week of play, they've played 3 games and they've gone from an 8 seed. Experts were projecting them as an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament to they've now fell all the way down to an 11 seed, and they're back on the bubble.
Yeah, that was my next question. So we have 3 games in the regular season left. Saturday, Kansas State at home, Baylor on Monday at home, and then Tech on the road next Saturday, March 4th. So what do they have to do? I mean, the obvious answer is win, but I mean, let's say they lose 2 of these 3. Let's say they lose Kansas State and Baylor, but win at Tech. Are they in?
I think they would need to. I'm not saying they have to go out and win the Big 12 tournament, but I think they need to do something there. I thought they might slide a little farther after losing against West Virginia, but they didn't. So that might be a sign of kind of where these bracketology experts are viewing the Cowboys, because they still do have that the signature win is going to be beating Iowa State at home. I guess they swept Iowa State this year when you had to win against them in Gallagher-Iba. They beat a top-ranked TCU team who was without 2 of their best players. So I think the resume right now obviously has them in because of their seeding, but I think when we look, I think you want to try to pick up another win and then maybe another win or 2 in the Big 12s to really be safe and feel good about getting in the tournament. But with the way these three teams are playing that they're about to face, Patrick, it's going to be hard, because Baylor looks great, Kansas State looks great. Obviously, they're both top 15 teams, but Texas Tech kind of looks like a buzzsaw right now, Patrick, especially after being, they beat Texas, they beat Kansas State. They've gotten hot all of a sudden, and OSU has to go to Lubbock for that one.
Yeah. So some work to be done. All right, you want to talk a little football?
Why not, Patrick? Why not?
We can always talk football.
Of course.
What's going on with Brian Nardo?
So as we got contract details, those came out last night. It's what you'd expect, Patrick, for a guy coming from a D2 school up to D1. It's 3 years, $650,000 a year. Basic stuff. I assume there wasn't much controversy getting to that number, and so we'll see. It's become a little bit of a trend for Gundy to give out those multi-year contracts to assistants, and we see that carry over with his new deal.
Yeah. What did you think of the media availability that OU had last week with its newcomers? That was a great idea, right?
Oh, I love that idea, Patrick. I think that's great, especially in the era. I don't know if it gets lost in the shuffle of everything, but I don't think everybody's thought about it this way yet. But when you've got all these new guys coming into a new town, whether through the transfer portal or through high school recruitment, especially in the age of NIL, getting those kids' names out there early, getting them, recognition and notoriety within the community, that could, maybe help lead to NIL deals for them, especially when you're given an opportunity to talk and kind of show some personality, and maybe some companies gravitate towards you after hearing you talk. I think that's great. And so I applaud OU for doing that and making all these guys available and letting them talk and letting them, show who they are. Especially as, college football gets more and more about, there's paranoia, Patrick, with making people available and all that. And so I commend OU for doing that. And I think for all the folks who were down there, I think everybody who was involved really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, just speaking as a reader of sports, it was great to get to know those guys a little bit from, and reading about, Trace Ford, and him going from, Stillwater to Norman, and Jackson Arnold, and, Peyton Bowen, who said he should be at Oregon if not for a paperwork snafu. I mean, and TU has something that they're planning, kind of a meet and greet with all of their new coaches since they have a new staff. I wish OSU would do something similar. You think there's any chance they might do something like this?
Oh, I would probably say, yeah, I'll never say no. I'll never say it's impossible. We'll see what happens, but I think it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for, for us media folks. It's great to go out and get to, build relationships with some of these guys. And then it's also great for the fans who get to read and learn, especially in February, where February is probably the slowest football month, Patrick. I would assume, and so for fans to be able to get a little football fix in February and learn about these new guys, I think it's great. And then for the players, I think it's also great because it lets them kind of start to kickstart their brand, lets them get in front of a camera and talk and be themselves and show what they're all about.
Yeah, it was a great idea, great event. Kudos to OU. I wish OSU would do something similar. All right, you want to anything else about football? You want to talk a little baseball, softball?
Let's talk some diamond sports. Let's wrap it up there, Patrick.
All right, where do you want to start? Softball or baseball?
Let's talk baseball because I guess we're recording this on a Wednesday. So last night they hosted Cal Baptist for a little midweek game, and combined, I think that they had 5 pitchers go last night, Patrick. They had a combined no-hitter, including they got to kind of right the ship after they allowed 32 runs this past weekend, opening weekend, Patrick, down in Arlington between Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas. They allowed 32 runs, so they got to kind of right the ship a little bit there, get back on track. So I think that's good for them, and they're still figuring that out. I think the pitching staff, the pitching rotation, the bullpen, it's something that Josh Holliday has always been. It's something this early stretch of the season is getting everybody right, making sure where people are going to thrive at and getting them in that spot. So it's still a work in progress, not because I'm not saying it's a terrible staff, Patrick. I'm just saying it's a work in progress. They're still trying to figure out where everybody's going to fit the best, as you kind of get rolling into conference play. And Nolan McLean is back. How about this, Patrick? He had the most strikeouts last year. For OSU, he had 107 strikeouts, most on the team. But down in Arlington in that 3-game stretch, he walked 6 times, struck out only twice, and hit a huge. It had this home run he hit, Patrick, had like an exit velocity of 112 miles per hour. Just smoked this ball. So he's back, and it's the Nolan McLean everybody knew from last year. He's kind of picked up where he left off.
All right, what's going on with softball? So before we talk softball a little bit, you had the little story on Talon Edwards, who she should be in high school at Southmore High School, but is starting left fielder for the Cowgirls, and she's off to a pretty good start.
She's off to a very good start, Patrick. She's got the second highest batting average on the Cowgirls team as an 18-year-old. I think it was. Hopefully I don't get my numbers mixed up. I think it was 485 she's batting. And the only girl that beats her is Rachel Becker, who transferred in from Purdue. She's their second baseman this year. Excuse me. And she's batting 500 right on the dot. I think she's got 11 hits on 22 at-bats. And then also Kylie Naomi's had a pretty impressive start to the season for the Cowgirls. She's got the third highest batting average at 485 or 458, excuse me, with 4 home runs, and that's kind of inconsistent with the rest of her career to be at 4 home runs already, because in all but one other season, she's only hit at most 8. So she's already halfway there, and I have a feeling she's going to eclipse that. And I think that's great for OSU, because coming into the season, I think a lot of the questions were, where's the power going to come from? And she's kind of stepped up into that role.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be really fun, a fun softball season with OSU as good as they are and OU always as good as they are. Both in the top 5. Obviously, it's going to be a fun season, I feel like.
No, 100% agree. And OSU, especially, I think something interesting that they're doing, and I know OU's doing it as well. They're talking about 4-pitcher rotations, and that's kind of unheard of in recent years in softball. I think you can even go back more than a decade, and it was most teams just had their one pitcher that they'd bring out there every game, and she'd throw the 7 innings and move on. And, there'd be a second option every once in a while. But to see OSU and OU too kind of getting deeper in their pitching staffs and being able to use 4 arms and, keep everybody fresh and keep everybody, especially when you get into postseason play where you're seeing teams that you've seen before, to be able to put out a new arm out there that team didn't see, I think that's a pretty big competitive advantage too.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else on your mind, or should we wrap it up?
I think we should wrap it up, Patrick.
All right. We appreciate you checking us out. You can download us for free on Google, Apple, or Spotify. Dean and I usually come at you once a week. Dean, have a good weekend, and we'll talk next week.
Of course.